Hello there, my name is Klaus Hostel and I'm doing 100 innovation keynotes in 100 days. Today's number 76. Today I'm going to talk about being indispensable, about 6 key factors that make you, as a company, indispensable. I'm also going to talk about this guy, because this guy is James Kerr, or Jim Kerr, as he is known to friends, of which I count myself as one of them. Now, Jim wrote a book recently. It's published, I don't know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, really recently, called Indispensable. Build and lead a company customers can't live without. It's gotten rave reviews. People are crazily excited about it. There are high level kind of people in the business sphere who are saying, oh, this is great, this is best. I can agree. I wish I'd read this years ago. Maybe my company wouldn't have died then. It's 237 indispensable pages. But for those of you who don't really have time to get into that, or who want I want to hear what this is about before getting into that, well, here's a short primer. It starts with a simple question. The question is, how do you become the company your customers can't live without? Well, according to Jim, there's 6 factors. Now, I know, according to Jim, it's a cheap pun. There's also a American TV show from somewhere maybe it's in the 90s, called According to Jim. These two Jims do not have a lot in common, except for being American men. One Jim is a fictional character. The other is a very real business author and thought leader. But, according to Jim, there's 6 factors. To become indispensable, you must have the right leadership. If you don't have that, well, then you're in trouble. If you don't have either it's top management, CEO, kind of a board, whatever kind of size you're talking about, you need to have the right leadership or the right leadership team, because if not, then things are going nowhere. Second, you need to have the right vision. It's not enough that you have great leaders. They also need to have a compelling place they want to go. They need to have a mission. They need to have something that they breathe, a dream that is bigger than themselves. Then you need to have the right culture. You can have a great vision, you can have great leaders, but if you have a terrible culture, you're not going to be indispensable. You need that strong culture, but you also need the right people. And by that, it's easy to say that culture and people are the same. Well, I disagree a bit. Jim does too. He explains more in the book. But shortly said, kind of the tiny of it is that people and culture, yes, there's a huge overlap, but you can have people who have great culture, but they don't have the skills. They don't know what to do. They may know where they're going. They may have great leaders. They may have an awesome company culture, but they simply aren't the right people. They simply don't have the skills. They could maybe get them, but they don't have them. Because if you want to become indispensable, you also need to actually be able to deliver, like the hard stuff sometimes. And then it gets tricky at the end, number 5 and 6. Number 5, you need to have the right empowerment and trust. There's a lovely survey I saw it some years back about Danish business leaders. Truth be told, the survey is not about Danish business leaders. That was just the lens I looked at it through. What it did was it asked people in different European countries, should the boss have all the answers? Now, in Denmark, where I'm from, the people who were surveyed said 11% of them said the boss should have all the answers. In Poland, and at this time I worked with some Polish employees, so that was really interesting, it said 70% said the boss should have all the answers. So the difference between 11% expecting the boss knows or should know and 70%, that was staggering. And of course, when we discussed this in our team, it opened up for a lot of fruitful discussions about should the boss know, does the boss know, is the boss an idiot? What do you do to prevent the boss being an idiot? So the right empowerment and trust, that can mean many things to many people. But according to Jim, it's a really important thing to get right if you want to build this indispensable company. And I agree. I could not agree more. You can have all the rest, but if you don't have empowerment, if you don't have trust, then it's like a beautiful rose that is going to wither away. And then finally, and this is perhaps the most tricky of all, you need to have the right change management practices. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well as the right people, the right culture, the right leadership, and the right change management practices. It sounds corporate. It sounds dry. It sounds like, but it's super needed because the shelf life of companies is going down. There's a McKinsey study that said, I think it was like in 1958, something like that, that the average lifetime, the average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company in the US was 68 years. Now, that number is below 18 years. According to some studies, it's 16, some say it's 14, some say it's 17. From 68 to like 15, 16, 17, 18 in just over 60 years. That is crazy. And that means that if you as a company, you can be doing everything right, suddenly the world changes. And you need to have great change management practices. You need to be able to flip, if not on a dime, then at least on a dollar bill. Because even though you were great, now suddenly you need to do something else. If not, you're going to join the ranks of those former great companies that suddenly turned out that they might have been indispensable, but if they didn't have the right change management practices, they're not going to stay that way. These 6, pretty easy to talk about, pretty hard to do. When I ran a company, some of this, yeah, we did that. Some of it, we did not do that at all. In the end, it crashed and burned. If I'd had this manual to look at, this guideline, this advice text, I think things would have gone differently. It's too late to save my company, but it might make a difference to others. And being me, of course, I looked at it and thought, how would I put this? Kind of, if I had to explain this to somebody using not Jim's words, but mine, or at least a little bit of a different one. Then I did a visualization, and I realized one thing. Realized that I differentiate a little bit. As I said, you should have the right vision, the right culture, the right people, right empowerment and trust, and the right change management practices. But at the center of it all, you need to have the right leadership. Because if you don't have that, then you're in deep trouble. And if you have that, that can push outwards. The right leadership can change the vision. It can change the culture. It can change the people. It can change the change management practices. And of course, provide empowerment and trust. But if you don't have that, if you don't have that right leadership, then you are in deep trouble. And maybe this is just because my biases have changed. Maybe this is just because I stopped being a leader of a company and I started advising other companies and helping other companies. And therefore I've gotten a bigger understanding of the power of the leader. Because when you're the leader, as I was, you maybe don't see that power as clearly because you're busy kind of surviving and dealing and managing and doing and dreaming and executing. But when you look at it as an outsider, the power of leadership is crazy indeed. So you need that. You need that right leadership. So if you have to pick one, if you have to focus on one, focus on that one, would be my advice. I can't say what Jim would say about it, but that would be my advice. I have a feeling he'd agree at least partly. No matter what, the book is a treasure chest. It contains tons. And since it's 237 pages, it doesn't weigh tons, but it contains tons of examples, tons of actions, and tons of advice. It is one of the books that I've read that is the best at saying, here's a point, here's a story, here's what you can do, here's why we think you should do it. It is loaded with these 3, with examples, with actions, and with advice. Brilliant book. You can even find it on Amazon. And with that, thank you for listening to this talk about being indispensable and this book walkthrough of Jim Kerr's book, Indispensable. Thank you for listening.